Hey everyone, my name is Ryan, and in this video I'm going to give you guys a really informal breakdown of how I created this image. So this isn't meant to be like a tutorial or anything, more of just like a kind of insight into the process of how I created this photo. There are tutorials that I have on some of the processes of setting up things like creating a project inside of Blender for the first time. And I will be creating some more in-depth breakdowns and tutorials in the future for various techniques that I'm doing inside of this project. But for this video, yeah, it's just a quick and informal, well, I wouldn't say too quick, but it's more of an informal, unstructured breakdown of how I created this image using Photoshop and Blender. So to start things off, this is of course, the original image. And this is just a simple 2-light setup, one light in the back, one light above, kind of filling in some of the shadows. Nothing too crazy here. If I turn on all of my edits, let's toggle off all the layers one at a time and turn off the layer mask, we can see here all we have going on for us is nothing too crazy here. So we have, I started off by kind of increasing the contrast a little bit and boosting the levels of my image. Then as far as skin retouching goes, all I did was just some blemish removal, removing a little bit of blemishes and some stray hairs, and then just doing a little bit of skin smoothing. Nothing too crazy, just enough to kind of even out some of the skin tones, because there's lots of harsh lighting going on here. So, you know, doing a little bit of skin retouching and skin smoothing can go a long way. And then for this, I just used frequency separation, which is a pretty common technique for skin retouching. And then after that, I did some dodging and burning, just some simple brightening and darkening curves adjustment layers, nothing too crazy here. And then with these layers right here, you can see they're just some selective color and levels adjustments. If I toggle them off and on, all I'm basically doing is just making the skin tones a little bit more warmer and darkening different areas of the suit so it brings more attention to the subject's face. And then I have some color layers here that just kind of adjust or enhance the glowing blue that are coming from the different props. And then after that, I just used some simple selection tools inside of Photoshop to cut my subject out from the background. Nothing too crazy here. There's a bunch of different tools you can use to cut your subject out from the background inside of Photoshop. And there's a lot of really good automated tools for subject selections. But if you can see here, this is the layer mask for it. Nothing too crazy. It's really not that detailed. Just enough to cut the subject out from the background. Nothing too crazy here. And then once I got this, I basically just exported out this cutout from Photoshop, and just make sure that, I just made sure that I was exporting it out as a PNG, not a JPEG, but a PNG, and then have transparency selected. That way, the subject is on a transparent layer with nothing else behind it. Before I bring this into Blender, what I first did was I used a program called Spark 3D. I don't know if it's a program, more like a website, but it's a service that basically you can feed it an image and it gives you a 3D model. Now, of course, this is AI. It's using AI technology to create the 3D model, and there's a lot of discourse and controversy around that. But for the purposes that I'm showing you right here, I think it's a very valid and useful tool to use it for. And I'll show you what I'm using to create what I'm using this for in just a moment. But basically, you can just go to this website, type in Spark 3D on Google. It's like the first one here. You go here and click on the demo page. And then it brings you to this website. You just click on upload. You click on the image that you want, double click it, and then you just hit generate. And then because this is a demo version, you're going to wait in line and tell it to process all the other, or wait for it to process all the other requests. And so after like 15-20 minutes or so, something like that, might take longer, you're going to have a preview of a 3D model, and you could just download it to your computer right away. So once you do that, here we are inside of Blender. Now this seems like a pretty complex scene right off the bat, but I'm going to go ahead and break down everything one by one so you can get a good idea of how I assembled the scene. It's really not that complex. Looking at it, it might seem that way, but once you see my process for building up a scene, you can get some pretty complex looking scenes that look really, really good in a fairly short amount of time. I created this whole thing in less than a day, and that's including making this motorcycle bike thing too, which took most of the time. And I'm also going to go over the process on how I created that. But if we just go and get out of render view mode here, you can see right here, this is the 3D model that we got out of Spark 3D. It did some adjustments to it down here on the foot, just so it contacted the ground a little bit better. I just used proportional editing to kind of move things around, because the model you get isn't going to be perfect at all. It's going to have a lot of misalignment issues and whatnot, and the feet might not touch the ground properly. So all I did was I just went into edit mode, pressed G, and used a proportional editing tool, which is this little button up here. And this basically just lets you scroll your mouse to select more or less of the 3D model to move. But anyway, let's close out of that real quick. Let me hide that. Let me turn this off. Let's turn that off. Let's turn that off. And let's turn off all the lights. So, and let's hide that. So I started off basically with a brand new project of Blender. I created a camera. I deleted everything and I created a camera. And for this camera, all I did was I first made sure that the focal length matches my real life camera. And then I go into the camera view. Oh, I also made sure that the resolution of the project matched the same aspect ratio of my project. So I think default is 1920 by 1080, but my Photoshop project is 1920 by 1280 or some proportion of that. It's a 2x3 setup. So you want to make sure that your aspect ratio here is the same proportions as the aspect ratio of your Photoshop document. Otherwise, things are going to look a little funky. So inside of the 3D camera, all I did here was go into the green data properties here, set up the focal length of the camera, and then I added a background image. And so that's just the box right here. Clicked on that, and I clicked on add image, and I just opened up that image that I saved outside of Photoshop. And then once you got that background image in your camera might be in some weird spot, who knows where. I basically like to just press Alt G and Alt R to reset everything, and then just kind of move it around from the beginning or from the center point. But let's put that back where that's at. Before I moved my camera though, before I started moving it around everywhere, what I would do is I would import the subject reference model that I created using AI. This is the model that I imported from Spark 3D. And I think by default, it centers it like on the ground like that. So just go into front view and bring it so it touches the ground. And you can see here, like the foot's not touching the ground perfectly. But that's fine. Again, like I said, you can use proportional editing to kind of move things around and stuff, because the 3D model is not going to be perfect at all. But yeah, so I have now a human-sized reference inside of my scene. I would go into my camera view, and if you try and move your camera or move around in the camera view, and it just shoots you out of the camera like this, like you see, like if I try to move around, it just shoots me out of the camera. What you want to do is you want to press N to open up this N panel, go to the item here, or maybe it's view. Yeah, it's view. Click on the camera, or I guess you don't have to click on the camera, but just make sure lock to 3D cursor. Whoops, not that one. Where are we at? Tool? View lock. Oh, there we go. Lock camera to view. Just make sure you click on this checkbox right here. And that way, when you go in your camera view and you start moving around, it actually moves your camera instead of moving you out of the camera view. So what I would do basically is I think by default, your camera's gonna be like way up here, something like that. So just with the background image enabled, I'm just gonna go basically in here and just kind of use the basic navigation controls to loosely line up my subject with the 3D model. And then once I get like 99% of the position dialed in, I'm just gonna go ahead and check my horizon line. And so in Photoshop, I'll reopen up the image and I'll check my horizon line, which is basically the height of the camera, of like where the camera was at in real life. And I can tell just by looking at this that the height of the camera is roughly around the height of the hips. And so that's where the horizon line is going to be. And so in Blender, I'll just go in here, I'll create a plane, I'll scale it up times like, I don't know, a ridiculous amount, like 500 or something like that. And this line is basically infinity, right? If I go out of my camera view, it just goes off forever in every direction. So that's basically my horizon line. So what I'll do is once I get my position of my camera, I'll start rotating my camera around so that the position of the horizon line, which is basically the borders of this plane that I just created, is set up properly. So I know it's going through the hips of my subject, and it was mostly level. It wasn't like crazy tilted like that. So I think around right here is roughly the correct horizon line. It might be a little off, but it's okay if it's close enough. And you can always adjust it later if you feel like it looks wrong or something. But yeah, that's the most important thing about setting up your Blender project, is making sure the horizon line is set up and making sure that the position of your camera is correct and that the focal length matches your real life camera. So once I did that, and I aligned everything, then I just started building my scene. So it's always a good idea to lock your camera. So click on the camera, and you can just go into the object properties here and just click on these little lock boxes right here. And that way you won't accidentally start moving around inside of the camera. And then I also don't want to select, I'm going to delete this plane. I don't want to keep selecting the camera and my subject, reference subject a lot. So I'm just going to click on the camera and turn off the selectability of this right here and right there. That way I can't accidentally keep clicking on them. And so if I go ahead and just kind of zoom out here a bit and turn on the objects in my scene one at a time, you're going to kind of see how I built up the scene. So I first started with a ground, which is just a simple ground object, or it's just a simple plane with tiling texture on here. And this texture is, it's literally just like a street texture from Quixel Megascans that I just basically had it repeat a bunch of times over and over again. If I go on my camera view here, it's nothing special. It's literally just a street. I did add some displacement onto that, but I'll go over that in another video. But for the most part, just add the texture to a plane and you're pretty much set up as long as the texture is good. And then I added in some other models from Quixel Megascans, just these little concrete barriers right here, and then a couple piles of dirt, which just kind of add a little bit of you can see they're just here in the foreground of the image. Let me zoom out a little bit. And again, yeah, it's nothing special, nothing crazy. Just a couple of objects here, just to give a little bit of added details in the foreground of the image. Let me undo moving those. And then on top of that, the last but not least, of course, is the bike, the Gaunt's mono bike, or whatever you want to call it. And give it a second to load up. Here we go. There we go. And this is, of course, like the main centerpiece, right, of this scene. And so if I go to my camera view here, that's basically the whole scene right here. And I'll go over my lighting setup in a second, but this is basically it. It's just the ground plane, some concrete barriers, and then the Gaunt's bike that is set up. And then yeah, so I want to go ahead and show you guys kind of like the process that I used to create this Gaunt's bike, because I did make it, but not entirely from scratch. It's more like it's using a technique which is called kit bashing. And let's just solo this object here, so we're not looking at anything else. So I do have an empty on here that everything's parented to, so I can quickly position the bike. But it's made up of all these tiny little pieces here. There's just a bunch of tiny little objects that are positioned around. And it's a technique called kit bashing, which is basically like playing with Legos but in 3D. And so if I hide a lot of these objects, right, we can see here that the whole thing is actually made up of, I don't know, like 50 different random pieces. So the only thing I actually modeled from scratch here is literally like just this tire. And all I did was I just grabbed a torus object and I just deleted out the interfaces and I just squished it a little bit. And then I also added in a rubber texture on this, but I didn't like the way that the rubber texture looked in 3D, so I made it really shiny. But yeah, if I hide everything or unhide everything, you can see that it's just made up of a bunch of different pieces that I added one at a time. So I think I started with this piece right here. And a lot of these pieces are from a kit bashing set called... I forgot what it's called, but it's by Big Medium Small. That's the company that makes this. So I bought this pack for like $180, which, you know, kind of seems like a lot of money, and it is. but I've gotten so much use out of it that it's definitely paid for itself over and over again. And this piece, and you don't have to buy this piece or this kit specifically. There's a bunch of kit bashing sets that you can buy online. Just go to any 3D website and type in kit bash, and you'll find lots of really good packs made by all kinds of people, or all kinds of packs made by a bunch of different people for different price ranges, some cheap, some inexpensive. Some of them are textured, like this one. All these come with textures already, and some of them don't have any textures at all. But it's pretty simple. It's basically just a bunch of different miscellaneous tiny little detail models, like just all kinds of cool little things. Like, look at this. I would never think to make this, but, you know, you can use this for all kinds of stuff. So I just basically grabbed, you know, let's just grab this random one right here. I copied the object and then went into the other blend file and then just pasted it into the scene. And then, so I just scale it down, rotate it, and I just moved it around until it was in a position that I liked. You can lock things to different axes, so that way you're not moving it on like in ways that you don't mean to, and you can just it's literally just like playing with Legos or model kit building or something. You're just taking a bunch of different bits that you think look good or like have the shape that you want, and then just kind of start positioning it around. And there's sometimes, to make things easier, sometimes I have a mirror modifier on this. So if I click on this object right here, right, I'll have a mirror modifier that I added. So I'll just toggle that off. It's just one piece, right? It's just a single kit bashing set that I got, or a piece that I got from that kit bashing set. And then I added a mirror modifier, and I just made it basically mirrored across on that z-axis of this object. And so it just makes it really easy for having detail on both sides of the object without spending too much time trying to place everything. But that's basically what I did for this whole thing. You see here, like this, more mirrored pieces. This is just some mirrored pieces again. Not everything is mirrored. Like this thing right here, it's just a single piece that I placed in the center and rotated it around. And this is the same piece, just duplicated and turned on its side. Right here, I have mirror modifier for the handle. Here, I just have like a photo scan of like a motorcycle engine, and this is just a photo scan of like a cockpit chair thing, right? You just go on like Sketchfab and type in like photo scans of whatever you want, and sometimes you can find really good detailed 3D models. But yeah, basically just one object at a time, just started placing things around. Here's like a little hydraulic thing that I use as like a kickstand. This is a little exhaust pipe right here. One other technique that I used a couple times on here is this piece right here. Let's see. I basically just, well, I already applied the modifier, so I can't undo it. But essentially what I did was, you know, in fact, I'll just redo it again. So let's go ahead and select objects and solo that again. And so what I did was I grabbed, let's see, where's it at? I think it was this one right here, or maybe it's not this one, but it doesn't matter. Okay, so just paste this. I'm going to paste this in here, resize it, and turn it a little bit. And then I'm going to show you basically how I kind of took this piece right here and bent it to fit the curve of this torus shape right here. So I basically just brought in the object here, resized it around like that. And then what you're going to need is you're going to need an object to bend around. It's kind of weird, but I just add an empty object and just bring it like right here, something like that. Just make sure it's you can see here it wasn't lined up at all because my 3D cursor is over here. So I'm just going to press Alt G and move that back here. I'm just going to line this up with object around right there. Cool. And so then pretty much I just click on the object, go to add modifier, deform, simple deform, change it to bend. And then for the object, eyedropper that empty that I just created. And then I want to, you see right now it's bending over this, the wrong axis. I want it to bend this way. So just change this from X to Y. And then you can just play around with the angle right here. And you basically can just, kind of get a bend that you want. And so I'll select both of these tools. You want to be careful if you select this one, it kind of, because it's bending around that empty object that was created, it moves in weird ways if you move the object. And if you click that empty, same thing too, because it's bending around this empty, it moves weirdly. So if you want to move it, you can select both of them and just move it together. And then all I did was basically just make sure that the angle looked right. So I'm going to go back on here and then make it a little bit more of an aggressive bend right here, something like that. I think that looks good. Then I'm going to go ahead and just click on this simple deform modifier and hit apply. Now I could delete this this empty, and this thing is kind of stuck in place here. So I'm just going to line it up with the object like this, maybe rescale it. And then all I did, actually let's make this a little bit smaller. All I did was basically, after I've applied the modifier, I just went to edit mode like this, right? And then I just used the proportional edit tool to just kind of push and pull different areas. And you don't have to be like, I mean, you can spend as much time as you want with it. I wanted to get this piece edited as fast as possible, so I really didn't spend that much time. It's like, it's really lopsided and kind of like a lot of the things don't line up properly. But you know, maybe the person who made the bike in real life, if this was a real life object, maybe the mechanic or the person who built it was bad. And so nothing has that's one thing to know in 3D is like people spend forever trying to make things perfect. But if you're going for realism or things that look photorealistic as much as possible, it's okay to have a lot of imperfections in things, because real life has lots of imperfections also. But yeah, that's basically how I made this bike. It's literally just a bunch of kit-bashed pieces of pre-made 3D objects that I used a reference image. You know, I brought up photos of what this bike looks like from the anime and the manga, and it's not a one-to-one creation, but I pretty much just recreated it using a reference image and a bunch of kit bashing techniques until I got the overall form that I liked. And then after that, I just created a big sphere empty, and I just basically positioned it over the bike, selected everything, selected the empty, and then just parented to that object. And then now I can move the whole bike together as one thing. So let me just delete that. Let's get out of this view, unsolo everything. And so that's basically it. You know, the scene was super simple to set up. It's just a plane with a street texture, a couple of concrete pillars and some dirt. And then the bike, which I spent the most time on for sure, which is just kit bashing everything. And then once I got the bike made, I'm going to go ahead and turn my subject reference back on. That's the 3D model that I got out of Spark 3D. And let's just make sure that the visibility of this thing is back on again. And so because I have the camera and the 3D model of my person where I want them to be, I basically just moved the empty of the bike and I scaled it, positioned it, rotated it to basically make it look like my subject is sitting on the seat or the side of the seat of this 3D model. And again, because I'm using this 3D model of a person right here, of my subject, when I light my scene in 3D, it's going to have shadows on the seat and the side of the bike because this 3D model right here is casting shadows. But I don't see the 3D model itself, only the shadows. So let's go ahead and go back into a camera view, and I'm going to turn off my camera for now so we don't see that. And then let's go ahead and I'm going to break down basically the lighting of this scene. And the lighting, again, it seems kind of complicated at first, but it's really not that complicated once you see everything in place. So here's the whole scene, and the lights are just made up of all these lights right here and a volume. So I'm going to turn off the volume. All the volume it's basically just a cube that I scaled way up over my entire scene. And if I open up the shader editor, you can see here, I just gave this cube a volume scatter material. I just plugged straight into the volume node, and then I just basically played around with these, the anisotropy and the density. And so you can see here, the density by default is set to 1, and you know that's way too strong. So I just set it down to 0.02, just a little bit, so we can see some of this little flaring of lighting or the scattering of light that's going through. Let me mess around with the noise real quick. 0.001. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to turn off all these lights and turn them on one at a time. So, oh yeah, one more thing I forgot to mention about the materials. So I did, for the kit bashing of this object, I also went into the materials of each kit bash object, and I basically just adjusted some of the settings so they look a little bit darker. And then you can see right here, I I multiplied a little bit of blue color over the existing 3D models, so they have more of a blue tint to them. And then the lights themselves, all I did was, for example, let's click on this object right here. I went to edit mode, and all I did was I just selected different parts of the object. Like maybe I'd click on here on parts that are like kind of hidden or something like that. And then I would add an emissive material and assign the polygon to that material. And so that it just, that part of the object glows. And then, yeah, I just did that all over the 3D model, just so I got little areas of glowing lights that I liked. Yeah, I didn't put too much thought into it. But yeah, that's basically the lighting for the object itself. But for the actual lights that I added into my scene, I'm just going to turn them on one at a time. So this first light, it's literally just, if I go out of my camera view here, it's just one light that I have here backlighting my scene. One thing to note that if you're doing photo composites is you want your lighting in 3D to generally match the lighting of your real scene. It doesn't have to be exact, but it should be pretty close. So if we look at the lighting of this scene right here, the predominant light source, the main light source that's in this image, or at least the strongest, most defining light source in this image, is this really strong backlight that I have going on here. And so I want to make sure that I'm reflecting a similar lighting setup inside of 3D. And so I think I started off with just a point light until I got the positioning of everything that I liked. And then I turned that point light by clicking on the light data properties here. I just changed that to a spotlight. And then I just basically rotated it around until it was hitting my object. And you could play around with the spot size and the blend of the spotlight. And I pretty much I just moved that one light around until I got like the main direction of my light source everywhere. And then if I turn on these other lights here, I'm going to turn them on one at a time. So this is just another spotlight, again, coming from the back, just highlighting different areas of my 3D model. This light right here, if we look at it by itself, it's a super subtle front lighting here, just to make it so nothing in the front is in pure black shadow. And that makes sense because my original image, nothing is in pure black also. And I do have a light that's at the top right, just out of frame. But most of the front lighting here is actually just from bouncing around the room because my subject was in a big concrete room. And so a lot of the lighting coming from, or a lot of the bounce lighting is coming from this main spotlight behind. So this is just more of a stylized light that I added right here, but it also helps kind of match the original photo as well. And if I turn on this next light, I think the rest of these lights, if I turn these ones off, then the rest of these lights are just some scene lighting. Yeah. So I just added some orange lights behind here, behind these concrete barriers, and I added another point light on the ground. And so if I look at all these lights together, the scene basically looks like that. And then I turned on the volume, and you can see here the blue light from the bike itself is kind of scattering some blue lighting here. But you will notice that none of these lights, maybe these orange ones are doing it. Yeah, you can see these orange lights back here are scattering light into the volume, but these really powerful spotlights right here are not. And that's because I went to the object properties of the spotlights, and I scrolled down to visibility, and then under volume scatter, you can see here, you just uncheck that box if you want to show or hide the volume scattering. Now, I do have volume scattering from a top light in the scene, but it's not coming from that lighting because it was just way too bright. And if I turn down the brightness of the light so that the scattering wasn't too strong, then I lost the strong rim light that I got on my object. So I just turned off the volume scattering of that light altogether. And what I did was I created a new volume light, or a new light. And right, you can see right here, it's just an area light or a spotlight, nothing too special, right? But what I did was for this light, if I turn off all the other lights, you can see here, all it's doing is just giving off some scattering in the volume. And what I did was I made it so this is how a light usually is, right? You know, it shoots light everywhere. This is the default settings. It both scatters light in volumes as well as, you know, lights objects. But I didn't want any more lighting in my scene. All I wanted was the volume light or the volume scattering. So I turned off these other checkboxes. And so all I'm getting here from this light is volume scatter. And so then what I can do is I can turn on all these lights, and then this light right here just gives me volume scattering that I have full control of. So now I can move this light around, and all it's doing is adjusting the scattering of the volume light. And then I can move it around, position it, change it. I can adjust the intensity or the color to whatever I want. I can make it red if I wanted to. It doesn't make much sense to have it red, but I could. Actually, this looks pretty cool right here, like that. But yeah, that way I'm not affecting any of the lighting that's on my scene. I'm only affecting the lighting that's scattering to the volume that I have set up. But yeah, so you can see with just some very few simple steps, I first, I built up the scene with the ground plane, or I got my camera in the correct position, and I set up a ground plane, put a couple of objects here, and then of course I have the hero prop, which is the bike, right? And I guess that wasn't too simple, but like you saw the process, right? It's not that complicated. All it takes is just having an artistic eye and just kind of knowing basic form. It's literally like playing with Legos. I didn't put too much thought into it at all. I just started moving things around until it looked good. And then I called it a day. I spent maybe 4 or 5 hours total building it, and that's just because I was playing around with a bunch of different techniques. But you could build up, and the same concept of building an object like this can be used to build up your scene too. Like for example, you could build up little buildings or areas of interest in your scene that aren't necessarily a single object that's meant to hold that purpose. Like for example, let me take this. This random 3D object, right? I'm just gonna scale it way up, right? And then rotate it on a different axes. Whoops, I messed up. Okay, it's not cooperating with me, but whatever. But yeah, look, like I could move this in the background, right? And let's duplicate that, move it around like that, rotate this one 90 degrees the other way, and then boom, like really quickly. I mean, you can't tell too much for this photo. That's why I didn't have a complex background anyway. But you can see what I mean, though, is that like you can just use random 3D objects for purposes that aren't like always their intended purpose, right? So this looks like some cool 3D like refinery warehouses or something in the background. I don't know what, but you can get creative with objects in 3D. You don't always have to find a perfect 3D model for the thing that you're trying to make. You can find up a bunch of like kit bashing sets and build your own model from scratch. Or I don't want to say from scratch, but you get what I'm saying, right? Is you kind of assemble the object that you want out of a bunch of smaller parts. And then again, with the lighting, the main light source here, I would say, that's sculpting my scene are these 2 spotlights right here. And then everything else is just a little bit of accent lighting. And I'm using spotlights so I don't have light everywhere. I just have it kind of hitting little different areas that I wanted to create some visual interest on. And that's basically it. And then once I got to this point, you can also see this checkerboard in the background. And that's because I have the world visibility turned off. If I go into my render settings and scroll all the way down to film and then transparent, I just have this box checked. Otherwise, it's just a black background. And honestly, that's kind of what I have originally in the final image anyway, is a black background. But I want it transparent because I want to be able to put things behind this, the bike right here. So I made sure the transparent was selected. And then I just rendered out this image. And then once the image was done rendering out, I just saved it to my computer, and then I brought it into Photoshop. Okay, so back in Photoshop, from where I left off is I did some skin retouching and just some skin softening and smoothing and some dodge and burn, and then I cut my subject out from the background, and so now I'm here. And then all I did was I brought my background image that I rendered out of Blender straight into the scene. And so let me go ahead and turn off all these layers first. And so here's just the raw render by itself. This is just the render straight out of Blender with nothing else. And then what I added was I added a gradient background layer behind the object. So you can see it's just a gradient. And then I just adjusted the levels. I tinted it a little bit with this color fill layer. And then I added kind of this like little sun refraction, light refraction element that I got from cghacks.com. I'm going to turn this back on render real quick so you can see it in context. So just building with the background. Again, started with the gradient, darkened it, colored it, added in this little cool little sun flare reflection. And then this is another reason why I wanted a transparent background, is so not only could I have all that stuff, but I also have full control over the background. So I can adjust like the lighting of the background, which is just a simple gradient. And then I can also add in things like the smoke right here. And the smoke is just more assets that I got from cghacks.com, which is a really good asset store that has lots of really cool Photoshop overlays and whatnot. And just as transparency, it is a company that I work for, and I do create the assets, or a lot of the assets, for that company. So it'd be really cool if you supported that company out by purchasing some assets from there. I don't just say that because I work there, but also because the things are really useful. And you'll see in a lot of the edits that I have upcoming right now, I pretty much use these CG Hacks assets in almost every single photo, or not almost every single photo, but literally every photo I use them in. But this one, for example, I use the smoke, which just adds a little bit of nice textural, atmospheric texture behind in the background. And then again, I just played around with the levels, and then I tinted them a little bit blue to match the blue lighting that was going from behind. And then after that, let's see, I just tinted. I have a couple of curves and levels adjustment layers on here just to help match the color of the render to my original image. I darkened the ground a little bit, darkened and brightened different areas. This is basically just dodging and burning on the actual 3D render itself. And so that's pretty much it. That's what I did to the background image. All I did was add in some smoke and some lens flares in the back and darken little bits of the image, so more of the attention is up here towards the face of my subject. And then on top of all that, I added in all these lens flares, and you can see here, some of these are quite small, but they're just things like this little flare right here. You can see that was in the original image, but it kind of got cut off when I did my subject cutout. So I basically just reintroduced this little lens flare. We have one up here too. And then I also added in some little bit of lens flares on the actual, the engine glows down here. I added some lens flare right here on the blade of the sword as well. So these lens flares, like, you can go overboard with them, but I think they add quite a bit just because the suit and everything that my subject was wearing is really, really shiny and reflective. There already, I had a lot of these little flaring bits. Like this flare right here was actually in the image. I didn't add this one, but I did add this one right here just to kind of enhance what was already there. I also added some here on the gun as well. And then again, like I did on the background, I just added a couple more flares on top of everything. Just because if you look at the original image, right, the original image had these flares. And so by reintroducing these flares digitally right here, not only does it help recreate the lighting conditions of the original image, it also helps anchor in all of the 3D to make it feel like it's an actual thing that I shot, right? It's all these small little things that are all these little imperfections, like lens flares, that are not present in 3D, that once you do add them there, it just kind of helps sell the realism of the scene a little bit better. So this group, yeah, as you can see here, it's just a bunch of lens flares that I got, all of them from cghacks.com. This layer right here is just some glows. And let's see. Yeah, you can see here, I painted in some glows on the boots of my subject. The subject requested that I added these because they didn't have them for the original photo shoot, but this character does have these glows, so it's nothing special. I literally just went in and I drew. I literally just drew squares on the feet and made it glow. So nothing special here. The main glows that you might see here. To show you how I made these glows, it's actually a pretty simple process. So I'm just going to recreate it from scratch right now, just to kind of give you guys an idea of how I did it. So I pretty much turned off these extra flares right here. And I just took this image and I added a new blink layer right here in Photoshop. And I pressed Control Alt Shift and E, or I think it's Command Option Shift and E if you're on a Mac. And I basically now have like everything merged into one layer on top, right? And then I just pressed Control L to bring up the levels, and I just pretty much crushed the levels like this. And it looks really, really bad like this at first, right? But just trust the process. So then I set the blending mode of that layer to screen. And then what I did was I pressed, I went up to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And what that's doing is you can already kind of see the effect right here, especially like on the gun or the edges. Actually, let's take a look on the gun right here. If I turn off and on the blurring of that layer, you can kind of see it adds this nice little glowing, hazy blur. And that's really good for like areas that are super bright. But also it's good because areas that are bright on the 3D render are blurring over the areas of my subject as well. So it kind of helps to tie in the objects together. But I didn't just do it one time. I did incremental steps. So the first time I blurred it like a little bit, let's just say like maybe 5, 6, 7 pixels like that, right? Hit OK. And then I duplicated that layer. Just press Control or Command J to duplicate that layer. And so now we have 2 layers here, right? And then I just, oops, I didn't mean to move that. I went to the Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur again, and then I made this blur even bigger, something like that. And I just did that like 2 or 3 times. So I'm going to duplicate it one more time, bring up the blur tool again, and I'm going to turn up the blur strength even more. Boom. And now I have something like this, and it's obviously way too strong. So I'm going to put all 3 of those blurred layers into a group and add an inverted layer mask so it's off. And then I use a nice soft round brush. Whoops. And painting white on that layer mask, I could just paint in different areas. Let's turn the flow down so it's not at 100%. And I could just paint in different areas of my image where I want that soft glow to be. Now, it's obviously way too strong, but I'm just showing you for demonstration purposes. You guys can kind of get an idea of what I did. And so this is really good for it helps soften up the image a little bit. You can, a lot of these areas that are like really, really crisp and areas that are really, really bright, it kind of helps just soften it up a bit. Makes it a little bit more dreamy, a little bit more, yeah, I think dreamy is the best way to kind of describe this. I don't really know how else to describe it. And this stuff is called bloom. And this stuff is kind of already present in real life, but it's not nearly as strong as you're seeing now. You can make it stronger with different filters that you put on your camera. But yeah, so, I kind of just painted everywhere, so I might as well not have had a layer mask. But you could go in with layer mask and, paint away. Like I don't want any on the face here because it's blurring out the face too much and it's making it look weird. So I'm just going to kind of erase it away from the face. But I do want it on the side a little bit like that. And then you can go ahead and if you want to, you can take that group of soft glow and you can just turn on or off, or you can even go ahead and reduce the opacity or the strength of these different layers just so it's not super strong. And that's just a really good, easy way to get like nice, soft glows over your whole entire image. So that's all I did. That's all I did here. That's basically all you see here. It's just me doing that same glow technique over and over again and just spending a little bit more time. And I think I have like 5 or 6 different glow layers for these different areas. And then for the blue, let's see, that might be its own layer by itself. Yeah. So for the blue glow, I actually use a different technique, but it's really simple. All I did was added a blank layer, and then I got the brush tool and I just selected like the color of the glow here, and I set the blending mode of that layer to screen, and I just make sure it's a big round soft brush, and you can basically just paint in. You can even increase the saturation, paint in blue, or all I did was I painted in blue over these little areas of bright glowing blue lights on my scene. And I mean, that's basically it. And then obviously it's way too strong, so I'm just gonna go in and turn the opacity to 0, and I'm just gonna slowly bring it back up again to like something like 30-40%. And that's all I did. Super simple, nothing special at all. And that's basically how you build up all these effects. It's just a lot of subtle effects built up one at a time. Then I did some sharpening. I basically just combined the image together again into one flat layer and sharpened it. And then I added a little bit of chromatic aberration. If I toggle this layer on and off, it's super subtle. You might be able to notice it right here. Yeah. So if I just turn this layer off and on, you can see the edges here. It's actually not as subtle as I thought. It's actually pretty strong of an effect. But yeah, I just added some chromatic aberration to everything. And then let's see. Let me turn on all these layers right here. Oh yeah, all I did with these layers right here is I just enhanced the blue glow that was coming off of the props of the outfit that my subject is wearing. If I turn these off and on, you can just see nothing special, just some added flares and extra glow coming to that. And then to finish things off, the final step was to go from this to this. All I did was press Control, Alt, Shift, and E to create a new layer. Again, I do this quite a bit. Basically just merges everything to one layer on top. And all I did was I just opened it up and go to Filter, Camera Raw. And then this basically opens up what is pretty much Lightroom, but inside of Photoshop. And all I did was I basically just color graded the image. And this is kind of what you do. Let's say if the whole process up to this point is basically making it look like you shot the image on your camera. And then at this point, you're basically editing the image. So imagine if you shot this in real life, the things that you would adjust here in Lightroom to like color grade your image and make it look like your style. That's basically what you're doing here. And so again, you're not meant to like copy me or anything like that. This is just the steps that I took. So, I adjusted levels, the temperature, the saturation, added a little bit of dehazing, a little clarity, some slight vignette. You can go in the color mixer tool. You can mess around with the hue shifts of the different colors here, or the saturation and the luminance, the brightness and stuff. Also, you can go in effects and add a little bit of film grain. And film grain is also a really good way to tie everything together because, by default, usually there's a little bit of film grain on the photo, but there's no film grain at all in the 3D. So if you just add a slight amount of film grain over everything, it's enough to introduce a little bit of film grain in both your 3D and your person or your subject, and it kind of ties things together. So film grain is really good if you use, if you can see, I don't know if it's even noticeable on YouTube here. Oops, let me turn off the color mixer tool right here. I'm going to turn up the strength of the grain. So if I turn it way up, obviously that's way too much. Let's just zoom in here. But you can see how it's kind of tying everything together, right? Like we got film grain on the 3D render and the subject all together, but I'm just going to turn the size down a little bit and then turn the strength way down. Something like 10, 15, 20 around there. Nothing too strong. And then, finish things off and go to the color grading tool. And this also helps just introduce colors. So for example, the highlights, this introduces a color into the highlights of the whole image. And then the shadows, I'll use this. This introduces a color into the shadows of the whole image. And so I'll usually do like a little bit of a warmer color of the shadows for the whole image. And then maybe a complementary color or something a little bit cooler into the highlights. And again, it's super subtle, super subtle. The strength of it is almost zero. But if I turn this off and on, it just kind of helps add a cohesive color grade to everything. And that's literally it. I'm going to go ahead and cancel this because I already have the changes that I want. But that's basically the step of how I created this image, starting with the original image straight out of camera, brought into 3D, built the bike from scratch, or mostly from scratch, assembled the bike from scratch, lit the scene in 3D using simple lighting techniques, nothing too crazy. And then just one by one, small adjustment at a time, blending all of the different elements together with lens flares and glows and film grain and adjusting the levels, the dodge and burn of everything, adding some smoke elements, some lens refractions. And yeah, you just combine all this together and you basically get the final image. So that's basically it, guys. I know it's not really a tutorial. It's not really meant for you to follow along step by step. This is more so just to kind of give you a breakdown or an insight to the workflow of how I created this image. If you guys are interested in some step-by-step tutorials, that is something that I plan on creating in the future. I just don't have the time for it right now, but hopefully these breakdowns kind of give you guys an idea as to what I'm doing. And then, if you have any questions, let me know down below. and I'll see you guys in the next video.